2 of the past 4 years have set records for wildfire losses, and 2025 is shaping up to be a doozy. Manitoba and Saskatchewan have already declared emergencies as their northern boreal forests go up in flames. A prolonged drought left soil moisture at or below 10th percentile levels. The southern prairies suffered the warmest winter on record, depleting the snowpack and allowing last year's deep burning peat fires to fester all winter. The Government of Canada forecast calls for above normal severity across Western Canada. No wonder Canadians are worried. A new poll shows that a large majority in all provinces are worried about the risk to their property and community, while concern about smoke is even higher. I spoke to Curtis Azevedo, Director of Operations for the Prairies at First Onsite, a leader in disaster and property restoration and reconstruction that is often called on to clean up and rebuild after wildfires do their worst. Welcome to the interview, Curtis.
Thank you very much for having me.
Well, this is very interesting. Of course, your company has done this survey of Canadians' attitudes or worries about wildfires. Maybe you could, give us a bit of an overview of the study, please.
Yeah, this is something that we've been running annually for over the past 5 years, and ultimately have seen an increase in concern towards wildfires and the impacts that those can have on people's property and personal health. So, as the publicity and trends of wildfires have continued to become more publicly aware, we've seen an increase in that concern.
Yeah, we live on Vancouver Island off the west coast of British Columbia, and we don't often get smoke here, but occasionally we do during the summertime. But people talk about it, and there's absolutely no question that the community is concerned about it, and concerned that at some point because Vancouver Island is fairly heavily forested, that at some point we're going to have fires, big fires on the island. So I would imagine that British Columbia, Alberta, and Saskatchewan are they the provinces where citizens are the most worried about
Yes.
wildfire and smoke?
Yeah, and actually Saskatchewan and Manitoba, the Prairies provinces, over the past couple of years have increased in concern. So we've seen them level out or become close to where we saw the West Coast concern in BC and Alberta being very high consistently over the past 5 years.
What about Ontario and Quebec? Frankly, all of Canada is heavily
Yeah.
forest in the northern areas, and there's plenty of forest in Ontario and Quebec. What are their attitudes?
Yeah, it's certainly a countrywide trend. There was major forest fires ignited by lightning near Montreal and in the Laurentian Mountains last year, so pretty significant impact on Quebec. And that smoke was actually recorded all the way over in Europe, so an immense amount of travel for the smoke and concerns that way as well.
Yes, I imagine there are those in the forest belt who would be directly affected, might have to evacuate, worried about their property. But smoke gets everybody, and
Yeah.
we're starting to. I think your survey noted that the admissions to ER with smoke issues or asthma have gone up significantly in the last couple of years.
Yep, can confirm that as well. And ultimately, we're seeing the smoke impacts from the wildfires, not just in Canada, but throughout the United States. And as I mentioned previously, in Europe as well. So it travels thousands and thousands of kilometers and has, yeah, impacts the entire country.
Now, here's an interesting issue, and this came up in your survey, the expanding wildland urban interface. And the reason I find this interesting is I lived for a number of years in Prince Albert, Saskatchewan, which is right on the edge of the
Yeah,
forest belt in Saskatchewan. And across the river, there was a community called Nesbitt Forest. And people had for decades have built houses right in the forest amongst these older pine trees. And a friend of mine was a firefighter, and he said, "Markham, we beg people to thin their forest out, to thin the trees around, to do whatever they can to reduce the fire hazard, and they wouldn't do it. They refused to do
yeah.
it." And it's only a matter of time before that forest burns and their houses are either threatened or burned up. Is that a common attitude in other parts of the country?
I think preserving nature is front of mind for a lot of people, and ultimately, they don't want to have a human impact on the areas that they surround. But very healthy land management is critical to preventing forest fires. So we've seen major efforts in clearing, logging, and prescribed burns to attempt to create fire breaks and ultimately prevent events like we saw in Jasper and slow the speed that these fires are moving because they've consistently been having a greater and greater impact on our land.
Yeah, let's talk about the insurance industry because this seems to be the thing that gets people's attention is when there's money involved. And I think you noted that the Aon, the big American insurance company,
Yep.
estimates that the Los Angeles fires from January are going to be like $38 billion.
Yep.
And that makes, then of course, everybody's premiums are going to go up to cover those kinds of bills. Is that a concern that showed up in your survey?
It is. People are concerned about property loss. And as I mentioned, the public awareness specifically of Jasper and the Pacific Palisades fire brought that very close to home for a number of people, recognizing that really, even within a national park, we weren't able to save some of our major infrastructure. And that is a difficult reality. So,
Yeah, I remember when the Fort McMurray fire in northern Alberta went through and burned some of Fort McMurray, and the video that came out of that fire, where we had dash cams and people were literally driving through with the forest was on fire on both sides of them, and it looked really really scary. And I would imagine that the ability to convey those visual images really drives it home for people.
absolutely. Yeah. And again, like speaking to the publicity, so many people travel to Jasper throughout Canada and are engaged in the national park program. It's a very personal impact. And then I think the Palisades fire at $38 billion potentially, that was all over the news. For any of us that are hockey fans, we saw that throughout a number of games and on TV as well. So I think people are recognizing the impact that this can have on your day-to-day life. And ultimately, everyone wants to think they're immune to some of these issues. But from an insurance perspective, they're starting to manage risk around these types of events and major climate events all over the country.
Yeah, let's talk about the issue of climate change. Does your survey suggest that Canadians are making the link between climate change and wildfires?
Yeah, there is suggestion that they are higher in some of the provinces out east and BC as well. And ultimately, the trend of increasing temperatures across the planet has been visible and has resulted or contributed to the increase in the number of fires and the intensity of those fires.
Tell me a little bit about your company and its role in wildfire management and restoration.
Yep, our company is a First Onsite restoration is a primary. We're often some of the first people on site after these major events, and ultimately working to restore and rebuild the communities to pre-loss condition and create a safe environment for people. So we had a major impact in Jasper, and ultimately processed through some of their largest infrastructure buildings to try to get them reopened and bring people back to the community. And that's our number one goal after these events.
So, in the case of Jasper, I would assume that some buildings burned, they have to be rebuilt. Other buildings would suffer from less major fire damage, maybe smoke damage, and that's where your company would come in.
We can come in and actually we're full scale restoration. So we will do both the properties that have burnt to the ground and ultimately start from foundation up. And we can also do the cleaning and effectively assure that there is no contaminants and the air quality is habitable and safe for people as well. So full service restoration, we can do it all.
Is Is there, given the magnitude of the wildfires and now the numbers of communities that are being affected, is this a growing industry? I mean, where are you having trouble getting people to work in it? Tell us a little bit about that.
It is a growing industry, and I think the resource allocation is a really critical thing when we're speaking about the economy behind insurance and restoration. As there are more and more fires and hail and thunderstorm events across the entire country, resources for this type of work are spread more and more thin. We're one of the largest property restoration providers in the country and throughout the United States as well. And we are still constantly hiring ultimately to support the growth of the industry. And yeah,
Well, great. Curtis has been very insightful. Thank you very much for this.
thank you very much for your time. Appreciate you having me.